The autumn rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of Marco's auto repair, like angry fists demanding entry. Outside, the streets of South Philadelphia glistened under the amber glow of streetlights, reflecting a city that never quite washed clean, no matter how hard it rained. Marco Rossi wiped his grease-stained hands on an equally stained rag and squinted at the black Cadillac Escalade that had just pulled up to his shop's entrance. It was 9:47 p.m. He'd been about to close. The Escalade's doors opened simultaneously, a choreographed movement that spoke of training and discipline. 4 men emerged, their suits too expensive for this neighborhood, their eyes too cold for casual conversation. Marco's stomach tightened. He'd lived in South Philly his entire 34 years. He knew what men in expensive suits meant when they showed up after dark. The largest of them, a mountain of a man with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, held the door open. From the back seat emerged Vincent Battaglia, and the temperature in the garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Battaglia was shorter than his men, perhaps 5'8", but he commanded space like a much larger person. His silver hair was slicked back perfectly despite the rain, his charcoal suit pristine. At 63, he was still the undisputed head of the Battaglia crime family, controlling everything from the port operations to the construction unions to half the city council. "Mr. Rossi," Battaglia said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Working late, I see." Marco set down his rag slowly, deliberately. His heart was pounding, but he'd learned long ago never to show fear to predators. "Mr. Battaglia, what brings you to my shop?" Battaglia smiled, a thin, mirthless expression. He walked slowly through the garage, examining the lifted Honda Civic, the tools scattered on the workbench, the faded Phillies pennant on the wall. "Nice little operation you have here. Your father, God rest his soul, he used to work on my cars back in the day. Did you know that?" "I did." Marco's father had died 10 years ago, leaving him this shop and a mountain of debt. "He spoke highly of you." "Liar," Battaglia said pleasantly, turning to face him. "Your father despised me, but he was smart enough to keep his mouth shut and do good work. You, on the other hand..." The scarred man stepped forward, placing a tablet on the workbench. On the screen was security footage from 3 weeks ago. Marco at a community meeting, standing at a microphone, speaking passionately about the criminal stranglehold on the neighborhood's small businesses. Marco's blood ran cold, but he kept his voice steady. "That was a neighborhood safety meeting. I was talking about street crime, not..." "You mentioned organized criminal enterprises extorting local businesses," Battaglia interrupted, his voice still calm but with an edge now. "You said, and I quote, 'We need to stand up to these parasites who think they own our streets.' Colorful language, Mr. Rossi. It's a free country. Free speech." "Free speech," Battaglia laughed. A short, sharp bark. "You hear that, boys? Free speech." His men chuckled obediently. The crime boss's expression hardened. "Let me explain something about freedom, Mr. Rossi. Your freedom exists because people like me allow it to exist. Your little speech. It embarrassed me, made me look weak, made some of my associates question whether Vincent Battaglia was losing his grip on his own territory. I never mentioned you by name. Everyone knew who you meant." For the first time, Battaglia's composure cracked, his voice rising. "You stood up there like some self-righteous Boy Scout and made me look like a fool." He took a breath, smoothing his tie, regaining control. "So now you owe me. A debt must be paid." Marco's mind raced. He'd heard the stories. People who crossed Battaglia disappeared or ended up broken or lost everything they owned. "I don't have much money, but I can..." "I don't want your money," Battaglia waved dismissively. "Your pathetic little shop probably barely breaks even. No, Mr. Rossi, I want something more creative." The crime boss pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then held it up. On the screen was a photo of a woman, perhaps late 20s, with dark curly hair and warm brown eyes that seemed sad despite her smile. She was heavy-set, wearing an oversized sweater that seemed chosen more for concealment than style. "This is my daughter, Sophia," Battaglia said. "My youngest child, my only daughter. Do you know what it's like, Mr. Rossi, to have a daughter who is imperfect?" Marco stared at the photo, confused about where this was going. "I don't..." "Sophia is 28 years old. She has a master's degree in library science from Penn. She speaks 4 languages. She can play piano beautifully. She gets that from her mother, God rest her soul. She's intelligent, cultured, well-read." Battaglia's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. "She's also fat. Obese, the doctors say. Has been since she was a teenager. Won't lose the weight no matter what we try. The way he said fat was filled with such contempt that Marco felt a flash of anger. He looked at the photo again, at Sophia's eyes, which held a depth of sadness that suggested she'd heard her father describe her this way before. My sons, they gave me grandchildren, respect, reputation, Battaglia continued. Sophia, she gave me embarrassment. She won't go out in public, won't socialize, won't meet the men I introduce her to. She hides in that house like a hermit, surrounded by her books and her music. A waste of a Battaglia. Why are you telling me this? Marco asked quietly. Battaglia's smile returned, cruel and calculating. Because, Mr. Rossi, you're going to date her. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. You're going to take her out, be seen with her, treat her like a girlfriend, once a week, for 6 months. Dinner, movies, whatever normal couples do. You're going to parade around this neighborhood with my fat daughter on your arm. The crime boss stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And everyone who heard your little speech will see Marco Rossi, the righteous mechanic who dared to challenge Vincent Battaglia, reduced to being the pity date for the mob boss's unwanted daughter. They'll laugh, they'll talk, and they'll remember that you don't cross me without consequences. Marco felt sick. That's cruel. To her, I mean. Using your own daughter like that. She'll never know it's a setup. As far as Sophia is concerned, I'm trying to help her meet someone. She's so desperate for affection, so starved for kindness. She'll probably fall in love with you. Battaglia shrugged. And when the 6 months are up, you'll break her heart and my debt will be paid. Everyone suffers a little. Everyone learns a lesson, and no one dies. I'm being generous, Mr. Rossi. And if I refuse? The scarred man cracked his knuckles. Battaglia glanced at him, then back at Marco. Then we'll have a different conversation, one that involves this shop burning down with you inside it. I'm offering you a choice, Mr. Rossi, a chance to settle this debt without bloodshed. I suggest you take it. Marco looked again at the photo on Battaglia's phone, at Sophia's sad eyes, at the forced smile that didn't quite reach them. He thought about being used as a weapon to humiliate this woman he'd never met, to break her heart for her father's amusement. But he also thought about the alternative, about burning, about disappearing. I need to think about— No. Battaglia pocketed his phone. You need to say yes right now, or my boys need to start breaking things, starting with your kneecaps. The rain continued its assault on the roof. Somewhere in the distance, a police siren wailed, too far away to matter, and probably on Battaglia's payroll anyway. Marco thought of his father, who'd spent 40 years bending to men like this, swallowing his pride, surviving. Fine, Marco said quietly. 6 months. Then we're done. 6 months, Battaglia agreed, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Marco shook it. The hand was cold and dry, like shaking hands with a snake. Sophia lives at my estate in Gladwin. I'll have my driver bring her here Friday night at 7 p.m. Take her somewhere nice, not too nice, you're a poor mechanic, remember, but nice enough that she feels special. And Mr. Rossi? Yes? Make it convincing. If I think for 1 second you're half-arsing this, if you make her feel ugly or unwanted or like the joke she is, I'll know, and then we'll have that other conversation. Battaglia turned to leave, his men following like a well-trained pack. At the door, he paused. Oh, and Mr. Rossi? Welcome to the family. The Cadillac's engine rumbled to life and then they were gone, leaving Marco alone in his garage with the rain and the weight of what he'd just agreed to. He looked at the workbench, at his father's old tools, at the small framed photo he kept of his parents on their wedding day. His mother had died when he was 12. His father had raised him alone, teaching him to fix cars and to be honest and to stand up for what was right. And now Marco had just agreed to break an innocent woman's heart to save his own skin. He picked up a wrench and threw it across the garage, where it clanged against a metal cabinet with a sound like a bell tolling. Then he sat down on his rolling stool, put his head in his hands, and listened to the rain wash over a city that never got clean. Friday was 3 days away. Marco had spent the last 3 days in a state of constant anxiety, his mind churning through scenarios and possibilities. He'd almost called Battaglia a dozen times to back out, but each time he remembered the scarred man's fists and the coldness in Battaglia's eyes, and he'd put the phone down. Now it was Friday at 6:47 p.m., and he was standing outside his shop in his only good suit, a navy blue number he'd bought for his father's funeral 10 years ago and hadn't worn since. It still fit mostly, though it was a little tight in the shoulders from years of physical labor. He'd showered twice, trimmed his beard, even splurged on a haircut at the barber shop down the street. The October evening was crisp and clear, the earlier week's rain replaced by that perfect autumn weather that made Philadelphia feel almost romantic. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk in shades of gold and red. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. At exactly 7 p.m., a black Mercedes S-Class pulled up. Not the intimidating Escalade, but something more subtle. The driver, an older man in a neat suit, got out and opened the rear passenger door. Sofia Battaglia emerged slowly, hesitantly, like someone not entirely sure they wanted to be there. Marco's first thought was that the photo on her father's phone hadn't done her justice. She was heavy-set, yes, probably around 250 pounds on a 5'6" frame, but there was a softness to her that the photo hadn't captured. Her dark hair fell in natural curls around her shoulders, and she wore a deep green dress that actually fit her properly, hugging her curves rather than trying to hide them. She'd done her makeup carefully, not too much, just enough to highlight her warm brown eyes and full lips. She carried a small black purse and wore low heels that she seemed uncertain about. But what struck Marco most was the expression on her face, equal parts hope and terror, like someone who'd been promised something wonderful but had learned through hard experience not to trust promises. Their eyes met across the sidewalk, and Marco saw her take a breath, squaring her shoulders as if preparing for battle. "Hi," she said softly as she approached. Her voice was surprisingly melodic, with the faintest trace of a North Philly accent that her expensive education hadn't quite erased. "You must be Marco. I'm Sofia." She extended her hand, and Marco shook it. Her hand was warm, her grip firm but not aggressive. "Sofia, it's nice to meet you." He was surprised to find he meant it. "You look beautiful." She blinked, as if the compliment had caught her off guard. A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up nice yourself. I half expected a guy in a grease-stained t-shirt." "I save those for special occasions," Marco said, and was rewarded with a small smile. Behind them, the driver cleared his throat. "Miss Sofia, your father asked me to remind you that you should be home by 11 p.m. "Yes, thank you, Robert," Sofia said, her voice taking on a practiced, formal tone. "You can tell my father I'm aware of the rules." The driver nodded, got back in the Mercedes, and pulled away. Sofia watched it go, and Marco saw her shoulders relax slightly, as if the car's departure had released some invisible pressure. "So," she said, turning back to him, "where are we going?" "My father said it was a surprise." Marco had thought carefully about this. Battaglia had said to take her somewhere nice but not too nice, a place that would fit his role as a struggling mechanic. But after seeing Sofia, after seeing the hope and fear warring in her eyes, he found himself caring less about Battaglia's cruel game and more about making sure this woman had a good evening. "There's a place in Old City," he said. "An Italian restaurant called Amada's. Small, family-owned, been there for 40 years. Best gnocchi in Philadelphia, and they make their pasta fresh every day. Not fancy, but good, real. Does that sound okay?" Sofia's smile widened, reaching her eyes this time. "That sounds perfect. I'm so tired of the places my father usually sends me to, all white tablecloths and snooty waiters and menus in French. I just want real food." "Then you're in for a treat." Marco gestured to his truck, a beat-up 2008 Ford F-150 with one slightly mismatched fender. "My Chariot awaits. Fair warning, the passenger seatbelt sticks a little." Sofia laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that surprised them both. "Better than my father's cars. Those things are so stuffy you can barely breathe." As Marco opened the passenger door for her, he noticed her hesitate slightly before climbing in, as if she was concerned about her size in the small space. But the old truck had a bench seat, and she fit comfortably. He closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side, his mind churning. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd prepared himself to spend an evening with someone spoiled and entitled, someone who would look down on his modest life and his humble shop. Instead, he'd met a woman who seemed almost as trapped as he was, just in a different kind of prison. The drive to Old City took 20 minutes, and Marco found himself surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. Sofia asked about his shop, and he told her about inheriting it from his father, about the struggle to keep it running, about his regulars who'd been coming to him for years. "What made you want to be a mechanic?" Sofia asked, genuinely curious. "Honestly?" I didn't choose it. It chose me. My dad needed help in the shop, and I was good with my hands, good at figuring out how things worked. Marco paused at a red light, glancing at her. But I love it now. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. Every car has a story, you know? The soccer mom's minivan that needs to last another 3 years until the kids are in college. The old guy's vintage Mustang that he's been restoring for 20 years. You're not just fixing machines, you're helping people's lives keep moving. Sophia was quiet for a moment. When he glanced over, she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "Most people would say it's just a job. Most people don't love what they do. I'm lucky that way." The light changed, and Marco continued driving. "What about you? Your father mentioned you have a master's degree." "Library science, yeah." Sophia's voice took on a new animation. "I love books, always have. I love the way libraries are these quiet spaces where anyone can go, where knowledge is free and available to everyone. Rich, poor, doesn't matter. Everyone gets the same access to the same stories, the same information. But you're not working in a library." Her expression clouded. "My father, he doesn't think it's appropriate for a battaglia to work in a public library. He says it's beneath our station. So I organize his personal library instead. 12,000 volumes catalogued and cross-referenced. It's not the same, but..." She shrugged. "At least I'm around books." Marco heard the resignation in her voice, the quiet sadness of dreams deferred. "That's bullshit," he said, before he could stop himself. Sophia's eyes widened. "Excuse me? Sorry, but it is. If you want to work in a library, you should work in a library. It's your life, your education, your passion. Why should anyone else decide what you do with it?" "You don't know my father," Sophia said quietly, looking out the window at the passing city lights. "Actually, I do. Met him a few days ago." Marco kept his voice neutral, not mentioning the circumstances. He seems like the kind of man who's used to getting his way. That's putting it mildly. Sophia was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something? Why did you agree to this date?" "My father told me he knew a nice mechanic who might be interested in meeting me, but men don't usually jump at the chance to go out with Vincent Battaglia's daughter. Too much baggage. Too much risk." Marco had prepared for this question, had crafted a careful lie, but looking at her in the dim light of the truck's cabin, seeing the vulnerability in her expression, he found he couldn't deliver the rehearsed line. "Honestly, your father made me an offer I couldn't refuse." He saw her flinch at the phrase, at the obvious implication. "But Sophia, I'm glad I'm here. I know that's probably a line you've heard before, but I mean it." She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I believe you. Or at least, I want to." They arrived at Amada's, a small restaurant tucked into a narrow building with brick walls, and a warm glow emanating from the windows. The smell of garlic and fresh bread greeted them as Marco opened the door, and inside the space was intimate and cozy, with maybe 15 tables and walls covered in family photos spanning decades. An elderly woman with silver hair and a warm smile greeted them. "Marco, it's been too long, your usual table. Hey, Mrs. Genovese." "Yeah, if it's available." "For you, always." She led them to a corner table, a small booth with red vinyl seats that had been patched and repatched over the years. "And who is this beautiful young lady?" "This is Sophia." "Sophia, this is Mrs. Genovese. She and her husband opened this place in 1984. 1983, Mrs. Genovese corrected with a wink. "But who's counting?" She handed them menus, handwritten, laminated, with grease spots that spoke of countless meals served. "The special tonight is osso buco, but honestly, everything is good. Can I start you with some wine?" "Please," Sophia said. "Red, if you have it." "We have it." Mrs. Genovese disappeared, and Sophia looked around the restaurant with something like wonder. "This place is incredible," she said. "It feels like a home." "It is, basically. Mr. and Mrs. Genovese live upstairs. Their kids all moved away, so the restaurant is their baby now." Marco opened his menu, though he didn't really need to. He'd been coming here since he was a teenager. "What sounds good?" They ordered. Sophia chose the gnocchi he'd recommended. Marco got his usual carbonara, and as they waited for the food, they talked, really talked. Sophia told him about growing up in her father's mansion in Gladwin, about the loneliness of being the only girl, the only one who didn't fit into the family's expectations. She told him about her mother, who died of cancer when Sophia was 16, and how she'd gained weight after that, finding comfort in food when comfort was in short supply elsewhere. "My brothers, they're both in the family business," she said, her voice careful, not specifying what that business was. "They're like my father, confident, aggressive, sure of their place in the world. I was always the odd one out. Too soft, too sensitive, too—" She gestured at herself. "Too human," Marco finished quietly. Sophia looked at him surprised. "Yeah, that's exactly it." Marco told her about his own life, about growing up in South Philly with his widowed father, about learning to be invisible in a neighborhood where the wrong attention could get you hurt, about his struggle to keep his father's shop alive in a world that increasingly valued corporate chains over family businesses. "After my dad died, I found out he owed money everywhere," Marco said. "The shop was mortgaged. There were unpaid bills, suppliers who'd extended credit he couldn't pay back. I almost lost everything. But I worked it out, payment by payment, hour by hour. 10 years later, I'm still here." "That's admirable," Sophia said. "A lot of people would have just walked away. It's not just a shop, it's his legacy, his dream. I couldn't let it die." Marco paused as Mrs. Genovese brought their food, steaming plates that looked and smelled incredible. "Besides, what else would I do? This is all I know." They ate, and the food was as good as Marco had promised. Sophia closed her eyes as she tasted the gnocchi, a look of pure bliss crossing her face. "Oh my God," she breathed. "This is incredible. How have I never been here? It's not exactly on the tourist maps. Word-of-mouth kind of place." Marco watched her enjoy the food and found himself smiling. There was something unself-conscious about the way she ate. No pretense, no attempt to be dainty or eat like a bird. She was just enjoying it. "Can I tell you something?" Sophia said after a moment. "And please don't take this the wrong way." "Sure. I was terrified to meet you tonight. When my father said he'd arranged this date, I assumed the worst. I thought you'd be some guy doing my father a favor, someone who'd spend the whole night looking uncomfortable or checking his watch or making it clear he couldn't wait to leave." She met his eyes. "But you're not. You're actually here, present, talking to me like I'm a person, not a burden or an obligation. Do you know how rare that is?" Marco felt a twist of guilt in his chest, because he was in fact someone doing her father a favor, someone who'd been forced into this date as payment for a debt. But looking at Sophia's face, at the genuine warmth and hope in her expression, he found that the cruel joke Battaglia had intended was backfiring, because Marco was discovering to his surprise that he liked Sophia Battaglia. She was funny, dry and self-deprecating in a way that wasn't bitter, but showed real self-awareness. She was smart. They'd spent 20 minutes discussing everything from politics to philosophy to their favorite books. And she was kind, genuinely interested in his life, asking questions that showed she actually cared about the answers. And yes, she was beautiful. Not in the conventional way that magazines advertised or that Hollywood celebrated, but in the way that real people were beautiful, imperfect and authentic, and radiating a warmth that had nothing to do with physical proportions. "Sophia," Marco said carefully, "I'm not going to lie to you. Your father did make it clear that going out with you was important to him. But that's not why I'm still here. I'm still here because I want to be." It was the truth, or at least a version of it. He left out the threats, the extortion, the 6-month timeline, but the core of it was honest. He did want to be there. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed his hand, a brief, gentle gesture that sent an unexpected warmth through him. "Thank you," she said simply. They finished dinner and lingered over coffee and tiramisu, their conversation meandering through topics both serious and silly. Marco told her about the most ridiculous repair requests he'd received, including one customer who was convinced their car was possessed by a demon. It turned out to be a loose heat shield. Sophia told him about organizing her father's library and finding a first edition Mark Twain hidden among the trashy thrillers, her father's actual reading preference, though he'd never admit it publicly. At 10:30, Marco checked his watch and reluctantly suggested they should head back. He didn't want to get Sophia in trouble by missing her curfew. The drive back to his shop was quieter, both of them seemingly lost in their own thoughts. When Marco pulled up to the curb, Sophia's Mercedes was already waiting, Robert the driver standing beside it with patient professionalism. "I had a really good time tonight," Sophia said, as Marco walked her to the car. I know this probably sounds pathetic, but this was one of the best nights I've had in years, maybe. It doesn't sound pathetic. I had a good time too. Marco surprised himself by meaning it completely. Could we do this again? Maybe next Friday? Sophia's face lit up. Really? You'd want to? Yeah, really. He opened the Mercedes door for her. Good night, Sophia. Good night, Marco. He watched the Mercedes pull away, its taillights disappearing into the Friday night traffic. Then he climbed back into his truck and sat there for a long moment, his hands on the steering wheel, his mind churning. Vincent Battaglia had sent his daughter as a weapon, a cruel joke meant to humiliate both her and Marco, to demonstrate his power and Marco's powerlessness. But something unexpected had happened. The weapon had become a person, and Marco Rossi, the mechanic who'd only agreed to this charade to save his own skin, found himself genuinely looking forward to next Friday. He pulled out his phone and found a text waiting from an unknown number, though he knew immediately who it was. Good start. 5 months and 3 weeks to go. Don't fuck it up. VB. Marco stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. He started his truck and drove home through the October night, and for the first time since Battaglia had walked into his shop, he didn't feel quite so trapped. He felt something else, something he didn't have a name for yet, something that felt dangerously like hope. The next 5 weeks passed in a blur of Friday night dates that became the highlight of Marco's week. He'd never been a romantic. His few previous relationships had been brief and ultimately unsatisfying, more about convenience than connection. But with Sophia, everything was different. Their second date was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where they spent 3 hours wandering through galleries, with Sophia providing fascinating insights into the paintings and sculptures, while Marco offered his simpler but equally valid observations about color and composition. They sat on the museum steps afterward, eating pretzels from a street vendor and watching the city move around them. "You know what I love about art?" Sophia had said, gesturing at the museum behind them. "It's proof that humans are capable of creating beauty for its own sake, not for profit, not for survival, just because something in us needs to make beautiful things. It's the most hopeful thing about our species." Their third date was at a small jazz club in University City, where they listened to a quartet play until midnight, and Sophia revealed she knew how to play piano. Marco had insisted they find a place with a piano, which led them to a bar that had an old upright in the corner. Sophia had played Chopin, then some jazz improvisation, her fingers moving across the keys with practiced grace, while a small crowd gathered to listen. Watching her lose herself in the music, Marco had felt something shift in his chest. By their fourth date, a Flyers game that Sophia initially protested she wouldn't understand, but ended up loving, screaming herself hoarse when Philadelphia scored in overtime, Marco could no longer deny what was happening. He was falling for Sophia Battaglia. It wasn't the slow, cautious interest he'd felt on their first date. It was something deeper, more terrifying. He found himself thinking about her between their Friday meetings, wondering what she was reading, what she thought about current events, whether she was happy or sad or lonely in that big house in Gladwin. He'd saved her number in his phone after their first date, and by week 3, they'd started texting. Nothing dramatic, just small check-ins, funny observations, photos of interesting things. Sophia sent him pictures of rare books in her father's library. Marco sent her photos of spectacularly broken cars with sarcastic captions. But the texting meant that Sophia had become a presence in his daily life, not just a Friday night obligation, and that was dangerous, because Marco knew, he'd known from the beginning, that this had an expiration date. 6 months, Battaglia had said. And after that, Marco was supposed to break Sophia's heart, to complete the cruel joke her father had orchestrated. The thought made him physically sick now. It was their 6th date, mid-November, with winter starting to bite at the city, when things shifted into dangerous territory. Marco had picked Sophia up as usual, and they'd driven out to Valley Forge National Historical Park. The weather was cold but clear, and they'd spent the afternoon walking the trails, looking at the historical markers, talking about everything and nothing. Sophia wore a deep burgundy sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She looked happy, truly happy in a way Marco hadn't seen in their earlier dates. The guarded wariness had faded, replaced by an openness that made her even more beautiful. They stopped at Washington's headquarters, looking out over the fields where soldiers had frozen and starved during the Revolutionary War winter of 1777-78. "Can you imagine it?" Sophia said softly. "Being so cold, so hungry, so far from home, but staying anyway, because you believed in something bigger than yourself." "I think most of them probably just wanted to go home," Marco said honestly. "But they stayed because the people next to them were staying. That's usually how courage works. It's not some grand principle. It's just not wanting to let down the person beside you." Sophia looked at him, her breath misting in the cold air. "Is that why you're still here with me? Because you don't want to let me down?" The question caught Marco off guard. "What do you mean?" "Marco, I'm not stupid." Sophia's voice was gentle but firm. "I know my father pressured you into this somehow. I don't know the details, and maybe I don't want to. But I know Vincent Battaglia doesn't arrange dates for his daughter out of paternal kindness. He wants something from you, or he's punishing you for something, or—" She trailed off, looking out at the historical fields. "I just need to know, are you here because you have to be, or because you want to be?" Marco felt his heart hammering. This was the moment he could tell her the truth, about the speech, the threats, the 6-month timeline, all of it. But looking at her face, at the vulnerability in her expression, he couldn't find the words. "It started as an obligation," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Your father made it clear that going out with you was important. But Sophia—" He stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Somewhere along the way, it stopped being an obligation. I look forward to Fridays all week. I think about you when you're not around. I want to know what you're thinking, what you're reading, whether you're happy. So yes, I'm here because I want to be. That's the truth." It was the truth as far as it went. He left out the rest, the cruelty of the setup, the intended heartbreak, the ticking clock. But what he'd said was real. Sophia's eyes searched his face. "I want to believe you." "Then believe me." She reached out and took his hand. Her hand was cold from the November air, but her touch sent warmth through him. "I'm falling for you, Marco. And that terrifies me because I've learned not to trust good things. Good things don't happen to Sophia Battaglia. But you feel real. This feels real." "It is real," Marco said, and meant it, even as guilt twisted in his stomach. They kissed then, their first kiss, 6 weeks into this strange relationship. It was soft and tentative, both of them uncertain, both of them afraid of what it meant. But it was also perfect, the kind of kiss that changes things, that moves a relationship from possibility to reality. When they pulled apart, Sophia was crying. "Hey," Marco said gently, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. That's the problem." Sophia laughed through her tears. "I'm happy, Marco. Genuinely, terrifyingly happy. And I don't know what to do with that. I've forgotten how." "Then let me remind you," Marco said, and kissed her again. They drove back to the city as the sun was setting, the sky painted in shades of purple and orange. Sophia sat close to him in the truck, her hand in his, and Marco felt both elated and doomed, because he'd crossed a line. This wasn't a performance anymore, wasn't him playing a role to fulfill an obligation. He'd fallen in love with Sophia Battaglia, really, truly, completely in love, and he had no idea how to navigate the disaster that was coming. When he dropped her off at his shop, where Robert was waiting with the Mercedes, Sophia kissed him one more time. "Next Friday?" she asked. "Next Friday," he confirmed, "and every Friday after that." She smiled, a radiant, unguarded expression that made his heart ache, and got into the Mercedes. Marco watched her drive away, then walked into his shop and closed the door. The space was dark and cold, filled with the familiar smells of oil and metal. He sat on his rolling stool and put his head in his hands. His phone buzzed. Another message from Battaglia's unknown number. 3 months down, 3 to go. Hope you're enjoying yourself. VB. Marco stared at the message, then threw his phone across the room, where it clattered against the workbench. He'd signed up for this knowing it was cruel, knowing it would hurt Sophia. But he'd assumed she'd be someone he could keep at arm's length, someone he could perform for without truly connecting with. He'd never imagined she'd be kind, funny, brilliant, and beautiful. He'd never imagined he'd fall in love. And now he was in an impossible situation, trapped between his genuine feelings for Sophia and the debt he owed her father, between the woman he loved and the man who could destroy everything Marco had built. The shop felt colder than usual, and Marco sat there in the darkness, wondering how you save someone when you're the weapon aimed at their heart. The next morning, Marco was under a Nissan Sentra, replacing brake pads, when he heard footsteps enter the shop. He rolled out from under the car, expecting a customer, and found Vincent Battaglia standing in his garage. The crime boss was alone this time. No bodyguards, no expensive suits. He wore a simple wool coat and slacks, looking almost ordinary except for the cold calculation in his eyes. "Mr. Battaglia," Marco said, getting to his feet and wiping his hands on a rag. "This is unexpected. I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd check on my investment." Battaglia walked around the shop slowly, examining things with apparent interest. "My daughter seems happy. She talks about you at dinner, which is more than she usually says. You're doing good work, Mr. Rossi." "Is that what this is? Work?" "Of course. Don't tell me you've forgotten our arrangement." Battaglia turned to face him, an amused expression on his face. 3 more months, then you break her heart, and your debt is paid. Simple. "Why?" Marco heard himself ask. "Why are you doing this to her? She's your daughter." "Because she needs to learn," Battaglia said, his voice hardening. "Sophia has always lived in a fantasy world, books and music and romantic nonsense. She needs to understand that the world is cruel, that people will use you, that trust is weakness. You're teaching her that lesson, Mr. Rossi, and when you're done, she'll be stronger for it. Harder, more like a Battaglia should be. Or you'll just break her," Marco said quietly. "If she breaks, then she was too weak to be my daughter." Battaglia's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. "Either way, she'll learn. And you'll walk away with your shop intact and your conscience," he smiled. "Well, your conscience is your problem. And if I don't go through with it? If I tell her the truth?" Battaglia's expression darkened. "Then we have a very different conversation. One that ends with you at the bottom of the Schuylkill River and your shop as a smouldering ruin. Am I clear, Mr. Rossi?" Marco met the crime boss's eyes, seeing the utter lack of empathy there, the cold calculation that treated people as game pieces. Crystal clear. "Good." Battaglia headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Rossi, I know you've been texting her between dates. That's fine, it adds authenticity. But don't get any ideas about running away together or playing hero. I have people watching both of you always. You make one wrong move, and everyone suffers. Understand?" Marco nodded, not trusting his voice. Battaglia left, and Marco stood alone in his shop, the walls seeming to close in around him. He was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. If he went through with Battaglia's plan, he'd destroy Sophia. If he refused, Battaglia would destroy him and probably Sophia anyway out of spite. And if he told Sophia the truth, she'd be crushed by the betrayal, and he'd still end up dead or broken. There was no good option, no way out. Marco's phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "Still thinking about yesterday, about the kiss, about you. Can't wait for Friday." Marco stared at the message, at the heart emoji, the first time she'd used one. Then he set the phone down carefully and went back to work on the Nissan, his hands moving automatically while his mind raced through impossible scenarios, searching desperately for a solution that didn't end in someone getting hurt. He didn't find one. The next 6 weeks were the best and worst of Marco's life. Best because his relationship with Sophia deepened in ways he'd never experienced before. They were no longer just going on dates. They were building something real. Their Friday nights expanded to include quick lunches when Sophia could slip away, late-night phone calls that stretched past midnight, texts throughout the day that made Marco smile even when he was covered in grease and exhausted from work. Worse because Marco knew with increasing certainty and dread that he was going to have to make an impossible choice. The deadline loomed like a storm on the horizon. 6 months. In 2 weeks, Marco's obligation to Vincent Battaglia would be complete, and he would be expected to break Sophia's heart as payment for his freedom. But Marco had realized something in the cold December weeks. He couldn't do it. He couldn't hurt Sophia. Not for his shop, not for his own safety, not for anything. The woman he'd come to know over the past 5 months was too precious, too genuine, too deserving of love and happiness. The thought of being the person who taught her that trust was foolish, that love was a weapon, it made him physically ill, but refusing meant consequences. Battaglia had made that clear. It was 2 weeks before Christmas and 1 week before the 6-month deadline when Marco made his decision. He'd been working late on a Saturday night, finishing a transmission replacement on a Honda Accord, when his phone rang. Sophia's name appeared on the screen, but when he answered, her voice was panicked. "Marco, I need help." "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but I did something stupid. I left my father's house without telling anyone, took one of the cars, and now I'm at the Free Library on Vine Street, and the car won't start, and I don't know who else to call." The words came out in a rush. "I know it's late. I know I shouldn't have—" "Stay there. I'm coming." Marco was already grabbing his keys, his heart pounding. 20 minutes, okay? Stay inside where it's safe." "Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Don't apologize. Just stay put." Marco made the drive in 15 minutes, breaking several traffic laws. The Free Library of Philadelphia stood like a temple on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, its classical facade lit by streetlights. Sophia was waiting in the entrance, wearing jeans and a thick winter coat, looking small and frightened. "Show me the car," Marco said, and she led him to a silver Lexus parked illegally at the curb. It took Marco 10 minutes to diagnose the problem. Dead battery, probably because someone, Sophia, had left the interior lights on. Simple fix. He had jumper cables in his truck, and soon had the Lexus running again. "There," he said, closing the hood. "You're good to go, but Sophia, what were you doing here at 10 p.m. on a Saturday?" Sophia looked at the library, then back at him. "Can we talk?" "Not here." "Somewhere private." They ended up at his shop. Marco had never brought Sophia there before, wanting to keep his workspace separate from their relationship. But now, with the Lexus parked on the street and the two of them inside the closed garage, it felt right somehow. Sophia looked around at the tools, the lifts, the cars in various states of repair. So this is where the magic happens. This is where the cursing and bleeding knuckles happen mostly. Marco leaned against his workbench. "Talk to me, what's going on?" Sophia took a breath. "I applied for a job at the Free Library. They had an opening for a reference librarian, and I just applied. I didn't tell my father, didn't ask permission. I went to the interview yesterday, and tonight they called and offered me the position." She looked at Marco with a mixture of excitement and terror. "I said yes." "Sophia, that's incredible." Marco felt genuine happiness for her, mixed with concern. "But your father, I know he's going to lose his mind. He'll say it's beneath me, that I'm embarrassing the family, that I'm being ungrateful." Sophia's hands were shaking. "But Marco, I can't keep living like this. Trapped in that house, cataloging books no one reads, being ashamed of myself, hiding from the world. You made me remember what it feels like to want things, to hope for things. And I want this. I want to work at that library, to help people, to use my degree for something meaningful." "Then you should do it," Marco said firmly. "Your father will adjust, and if he doesn't, that's his problem, not yours." "That's easy to say when you don't know Vincent Battaglia." Sophia's voice dropped. "Marco, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you months ago." She looked at him, and Marco saw fear in her eyes, real, bone-deep fear. "I know what my father is. I know what my family does." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The racketeering, the extortion, the violence. I've tried to pretend I don't know, tried to convince myself it's just business. But I'm not stupid. My father is a monster, and my brothers are becoming monsters too, and I've been complicit through my silence." Marco said nothing, letting her continue. "When he told me he'd arranged for me to meet you, I was suspicious. My father doesn't do kind things without a reason, so I need to know, and please be honest with me. Why are you really here? What did he do to make you agree to this?" This was it. The moment Marco had been dreading and in some ways hoping for, the chance to tell the truth. "He threatened to burn down my shop with me inside it," Marco said quietly. 6 months ago, I spoke at a neighborhood meeting, complained about organized crime in the area. Didn't mention your father by name, but everyone knew who I meant. A few days later, he showed up here with his men, said I'd embarrassed him, that I owed him a debt." Marco met Sophia's eyes. "The debt was to date you for 6 months, to be seen with you around the neighborhood, to let people laugh at the mechanic who challenged Vincent Battaglia being reduced to a pity date for his unwanted daughter." He saw Sophia flinch and pushed on. "At the end of 6 months, I was supposed to break your heart. That was the joke. Everyone would see that even Sophia Battaglia's fake boyfriend couldn't stand her." Tears were streaming down Sophia's face now, but she didn't interrupt. "I agreed because I was scared, because I wanted to save my shop, my father's legacy, because I'm a coward." Marco's voice cracked. But Sophia, here's what your father didn't count on. You're not a joke. You're brilliant and kind and funny and beautiful, and somewhere in the past 5 months I fell completely in love with you. This stopped being an act for me around date 2, and the thought of hurting you, of being another person who makes you feel worthless, I can't do it, I won't do it. Sophia was crying openly now, her whole body shaking. So this whole time I've been trapped between what I feel for you and what your father expects me to do. And I've made my choice. Marco stepped closer to her. I'm choosing you, I'm telling you the truth, and I'm prepared to face whatever consequences come from that, because you deserve better than lies and manipulation. He'll kill you, Sophia whispered. You don't understand. My father doesn't make empty threats. I don't care. And Marco realized he meant it. Some things are worth dying for. You're worth dying for. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, her expressions cycling through hurt, anger, fear, and something else, something that looked like hope. We need to leave, she said suddenly. Both of us. Tonight. If my father finds out you told me the truth, he'll kill you. And if he finds out I took this job without his permission... She grabbed Marco's hands. We can go somewhere he can't find us. I have money saved. We can... Sophia, we can't run forever. Your father has connections everywhere. We'd be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. Then what do we do? She was desperate now, terrified. There has to be a way out of this. Marco thought for a moment, his mechanic's brain working through the problem like a complex engine repair. Vincent Battaglia was powerful, yes, but his power came from fear and secrecy, from operating in the shadows while maintaining a veneer of legitimacy. What if we took away his power? Marco said slowly. What if we exposed him? You mean go to the police? Marco, half the police in this city are on his payroll. Not the local police, the FBI. The feds have been trying to build RICO cases against families like your father's for years. If we gave them evidence, real evidence, the kind that comes from inside the family, they'd protect us, Sophia finished, understanding dawning. Witness protection. It would mean giving up everything. Your family, my shop, this city. We'd have to disappear, become different people. Marco squeezed her hands. But we'd be together, and we'd be free. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, thinking. I have access to my father's computers, his files. I've seen things over the years. Ledgers, communications, names. I never looked too closely because I didn't want to know, but she met Marco's eyes. If I'm going to betray him, I'm going to do it right. Give the FBI everything they need to put him away forever. This is dangerous. If he finds out what you're doing... I know. Sophia's voice was steady now, determined. But I'm tired of being afraid, tired of being complicit, and I'm tired of letting my father destroy everyone around him. She took a breath. When do we do this? Tomorrow, Sunday. Your father will be at home, right? You can access his files. Yes. He always goes to his club on Sunday afternoons. Some tradition with his associates. I'll have a few hours. Sophia pulled out her phone. I'll copy everything to a secure drive. Then what? Then we call the FBI field office, request a meeting, turn over the evidence. Marco pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. And then we disappear. Together. Sophia buried her face in his chest, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. I'm scared, Marco. Me too. But we're doing the right thing. Promise me something. She looked up at him, her eyes red but determined. Promise me that when this is over, when we're wherever we end up being, you'll still see me the way you see me now. Not as Vincent Battaglia's daughter, not as the weapon he used against you, but just me. I promise, Marco said, and kissed her. A kiss that tasted of tears and fear and hope. They spent the night planning, working out every detail. Sophia would go home that night, act normal, not raise any suspicions. Tomorrow, while her father was out, she'd copy every file she could access. Marco would research FBI contacts, find someone who specialized in organized crime cases. They'd meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Center City, and from there go directly to the FBI field office on Arch Street. At 2 a.m., Marco walked Sophia to her car. The December night was bitter cold, the streets empty and still. Whatever happens, Sophia said, her hand on the car door, thank you for being honest with me, for caring about me more than you cared about your own safety, for showing me what real love looks like. We're going to get through this, Marco said. A year from now we'll be somewhere new, living quiet lives, and this will all be a bad memory. I hope you're right. Sophia kissed him one more time, then got in the Lexus. Marco watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the Philadelphia night. Then he went back into his shop and started making phone calls. Sunday afternoon, Marco sat in a coffee shop on Walnut Street, a laptop open in front of him, his phone clutched in his hand. He'd been there for an hour, nursing the same cup of coffee, jumping every time the door opened. At 3:17 p.m. Sophia walked in. She looked pale, frightened, but determined. She carried a large purse and walked directly to Marco's table, sliding into the seat across from him. "I have it," she said quietly, pulling a thumb drive from her purse. "Everything. Financial records going back 15 years, names of associates, documentation of illegal deals, even some video files from his home security system. The FBI will have enough to indict half the organized crime figures in Philadelphia." Marco took the drive, feeling the weight of it, such a small thing to contain so much power. "Your father doesn't suspect?" "He was at his club all afternoon. I was careful, covered my tracks." Sophia's hands were shaking. "But we need to move fast. Once he realizes the files have been accessed, he'll know it was me." Marco had already made contact with an FBI agent named Patricia Dawson, who specialized in organized crime. She'd been skeptical at first, probably assumed it was a prank, but when Marco had mentioned Vincent Battaglia by name and claimed to have evidence from inside the family, her tone had changed dramatically. They were expected at the FBI field office in 30 minutes. "You ready?" Marco asked. "No, but let's do it anyway." They left the coffee shop together, Marco's truck parked 2 blocks away. As they walked, Sophia took his hand. "Whatever happens next," she said, "I want you to know, these past 5 months have been the happiest of my life. Even knowing how it started, even knowing about the lies, I don't regret it. You showed me what I was worth. You saved me." "We saved each other," Marco said. They were half a block from his truck when a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up beside them. Marco's blood ran cold. The rear window rolled down, revealing Vincent Battaglia's face, cold, furious, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Get in the car," Battaglia said quietly. "Both of you, now." "Run," Marco whispered to Sophia. But before they could move, the scarred man and 2 other thugs emerged from the Escalade, surrounding them. "I said get in the car." Battaglia's voice was like ice. "Don't make a scene, Sophia. Think of all these nice people on the street. Wouldn't want them to get hurt because you decided to be difficult." Sophia's face had gone white. She looked at Marco, then at her father, then slowly nodded. They got into the Escalade, Marco's mind racing through options and finding none that didn't end in bloodshed. The scarred man searched them efficiently, finding Marco's phone and the thumb drive. He handed both to Battaglia, who examined the drive with a thin smile. "Did you really think I wouldn't know?" Battaglia said as the Escalade pulled into traffic. "I have monitoring software on all my computers, Sophia. The second you started copying files, I was alerted. I've been watching you all afternoon, waiting to see what you'd do, and you, Mr. Rossi." He turned his cold gaze on Marco. "You were supposed to break my daughter's heart. Instead, you put ideas in her head, made her think she could defy me." "She doesn't need me to give her ideas," Marco said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Sophia's stronger than you ever gave her credit for." "Strong?" Battaglia laughed. "She's weak, always has been. Too soft, too emotional, too much like her mother. I gave her every advantage. Money, education, security. And she repays me with betrayal." He pocketed the thumb drive. "But that's fine. We're going to sort this out as a family." "Where are you taking us?" Sophia asked, her voice small. "Home, where we can have a proper conversation without interruptions." Battaglia smiled. "Don't worry, Sophia. You're my daughter. I'm not going to kill you. But Mr. Rossi here, he's outlived his usefulness." The drive to Gladwin took 20 minutes. 20 minutes in which Marco held Sophia's hand and tried to think of a way out. The Battaglia estate was everything Marco had imagined. A sprawling mansion behind high walls and security gates, isolated from the world. They were led inside to a study that looked like something from a movie. Dark wood paneling, expensive furniture, walls lined with books that probably had never been read. Battaglia sat behind a massive desk, while his men positioned themselves by the doors. "Sit," Battaglia commanded, gesturing to 2 chairs facing the desk. They sat. "Let me explain something to both of you," Battaglia began, his voice conversational. I built this family from nothing. My father was a nobody, a street thug who died in prison when I was 12. I swore I'd be different, smarter, more powerful, and I succeeded. The battalion name means something now. It means respect. It means fear. It means power. He stood, walking around the desk to stand in front of them. And I will not let that legacy be destroyed by my weak daughter, and a mechanic with delusions of heroism. He looked at Sophia. You think you can work in a library, live a normal life. You're a battaglia, Sophia. That name comes with responsibilities. You don't get to opt out. I don't want to be a battaglia, Sophia said quietly. I never did. I want to be me. Her father's hand moved so fast that Marco didn't see it until it had already connected with Sophia's face, a vicious slap that split her lip and knocked her from the chair. Marco was on his feet instantly, but the scarred man grabbed him, powerful arms pinning him back. Marco struggled, but it was like fighting a boulder. Don't touch her, Marco snarled. Sophia was on the floor, her hand to her bleeding mouth, looking up at her father with a mixture of pain and something else. Defiance. Get up, Battaglia commanded. Sophia got to her feet slowly, wiping blood from her lip, and stood facing her father. She was shaking, but she didn't look away. You're not a man, she said clearly. You're a bully and a coward who can only feel powerful by hurting people who can't fight back. You killed any love I had for you years ago. And now I just feel sorry for you. For a moment, Marco thought Battaglia might hit her again. The crime boss's face had gone purple with rage, his hands clenched into fists. Then, slowly, he smiled. I see Mr. Rossi did his job too well. Made you think you're brave. Made you think you matter. Battaglia returned to his desk, sitting down and pulling a gun from a drawer, a sleek black pistol that he placed carefully on the desk in front of him. So let's see how brave you really are, Sophia. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to kill Mr. Rossi right here, right now, as punishment for his failure to complete our arrangement. And you're going to watch. And then you're going to forget this nonsense about libraries and independence, and you're going to be the obedient daughter you should have been all along. Understood? No, Sophia said simply. Battaglia blinked. Excuse me? I said no. You're not going to kill Marco. Sophia stepped forward, positioning herself between her father and Marco. Because if you do, I'll tell the FBI everything I know. I memorized account numbers, names, dates, everything on that drive and more. Kill him, and I'll make it my life's mission to destroy you. You would betray your own family? Battaglia's voice was incredulous. You stopped being my family the day you decided I was worthless because of my weight. You stopped being my family every time you looked at me with disgust. You stopped being my family when you sent me to Marco as a joke, as a weapon, as trash to be used and discarded. Sophia's voice was growing stronger, more certain. Marco showed me what family really means. Caring about someone else more than yourself, protecting them, helping them grow. That's not something you've ever understood. Battaglia stared at his daughter for a long moment. Then he picked up the gun. I'm disappointed, Sophia. I really am. He pointed the gun not at Marco but at Sophia herself. If you won't be a useful daughter, then you won't be a daughter at all. Everything happened very quickly then. Marco broke free from the scarred man with a burst of desperate strength, throwing himself between Sophia and her father. Battaglia fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, a crack like thunder that seemed to stop time itself. Marco felt a massive impact in his shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the floor. Pain exploded through him, white-hot and all-consuming. Sophia screamed. Through the haze of pain, Marco heard shouting, movement, chaos. He was on the floor, his shoulder on fire, warm blood spreading across his chest. Sophia was beside him, her hands pressing against the wound, her face pale with terror. Marco, stay with me, please stay with me. Then there were new voices, authoritative, commanding, FBI, drop your weapon. Get on the ground, now. Marco's vision was starting to blur, but he saw figures in FBI windbreakers flooding into the room, saw Battaglia being pushed face first onto his expensive desk and handcuffed, saw his men being subdued and arrested. Agent Dawson appeared, kneeling beside Marco and Sophia. Ambulance is on the way. Hang in there. How? Marco managed to gasp. Your phone, Dawson said. When we lost contact after you didn't show up for the meeting, we pinged it. Found it in Battaglia's car, which led us here. Good thing we got suspicious. She looked at Sophia. Your father's going away for a very long time. We've got enough on him for multiple RICO charges, even without the drive. Sophia was crying, holding Marco's hand, her other hand still pressed against his shoulder to slow the bleeding. "You stupid, stupid man, why did you do that?" "Because," Marco said, his voice weak but certain, "I love you, and some things are worth taking a bullet for." His vision faded to black then, the sound of sirens in the distance, Sophia's voice calling his name, and the strange peace that came from knowing he'd made the right choice. The small apartment in Portland, Oregon, had a view of Mount Hood on clear days, and today was very clear indeed. Sarah Mitchell, formerly Sophia Battaglia, stood at the kitchen window watching the mountain glow pink in the morning light, and felt something she'd never experienced in her first 28 years of life: contentment. "Coffee's ready," called Michael Ross, formerly Marco Rossi, from the kitchen. He walked over with 2 mugs, handing her one. His left shoulder still bothered him sometimes. Physical therapy had helped, but the bullet had done permanent damage. But he was alive. They were both alive. "How'd you sleep?" Sarah asked, leaning into his embrace. "Like a baby, no nightmares." Michael kissed the top of her head. "What time do you need to leave?" 8. "I'm helping with the children's reading hour this morning." Sarah worked at the Multnomah County Library now, finally using her degree, finally helping people. She'd taken to her new job and her new life with an enthusiasm that still surprised her. "What about you?" "Shop opens at 9. Got 3 repairs scheduled and a vintage Mustang coming in for restoration work." Michael had opened a small auto repair shop in a strip mall on the east side of Portland. It wasn't much, nothing like his father's place in Philadelphia, but it was his, and it was clean, untainted by mob money or extortion or violence. They'd been in Portland for 14 months, living under new identities provided by the FBI's Witness Protection Program. Vincent Battaglia was serving 25 years to life in federal prison, convicted on RICO charges, extortion, attempted murder, and a dozen other counts. Most of his organization had been dismantled in the largest mob bust in Philadelphia history. Sophia's brothers had tried to contact her through the FBI, pleading for her to recant her testimony. She'd refused. They'd chosen their path. She'd chosen hers. The hardest part had been the isolation. No contact with anyone from their previous lives, new names, new backgrounds, new everything. But it had also been the most freeing experience of Sarah's life. Here, no one knew she was Vincent Battaglia's daughter. No one cared about her weight or her family's reputation. She was just Sarah, a librarian who loved books and helped children learn to read. And she had Michael, the man who'd risked everything to save her, who'd taken a bullet meant for her, who saw her as beautiful when the rest of the world had told her she wasn't. They'd gotten married 6 months ago, in a small ceremony, with just their FBI handler as a witness. It wasn't the wedding Sarah had dreamed about as a girl, but it was perfect, simple, honest, and full of love. "I was thinking," Michael said, setting down his coffee mug, "maybe we could look at houses this weekend. We've been saving up and there are some nice places in Beaverton we could afford." "A house?" Sarah felt a flutter of excitement. "Really? Really? Some place with a yard, maybe. Space for—" He paused, looking at her hopefully. "Space for a family, if that's something you want?" Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Happy tears, the kind she'd never imagined she'd cry. "I want that. I want everything with you. Then let's do it. Let's build a life." Michael pulled her close. "A real one this time. No lies, no debts, no fear, just us." Sarah kissed him, tasting coffee and promise and hope. In the distance, Mount Hood stood eternal and beautiful, and somewhere 1,000 miles away, the city they'd left behind continued without them. But they didn't miss it. They'd found something better. A quiet life, honest work, and love that had survived betrayal and violence and impossible choices. They'd found freedom. And that was worth more than all the power in the world. The end.